The fluorescent lights of the Interstate 95 rest stop diner buzzed overhead on that chilly October evening. Sarah Johnson, a 12-year-old African-American girl with neatly braided hair and a blue school backpack, sat in a worn leather booth, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the untouched plate of fries in front of her. Across the table, a middle-aged white man with graying hair and weathered skin watched her intently. He called himself Richard Thompson and claimed to be her father, but everything about their interaction felt wrong to anyone who paid attention. His knuckles were white as he gripped his coffee mug, and his eyes darted nervously around the diner every few minutes. "Eat your food," he commanded in a low voice, trying to maintain a facade of parental concern while other customers sat nearby. "We got a long drive ahead." Sarah picked up a French fry and took a small bite, fighting back tears. Just 3 days ago, she had been at the Riverside Mall in Georgia with her best friend Emma, shopping for birthday presents. Now, she was hundreds of miles from home, trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. The diner was relatively quiet for 7:30 p.m., with only a handful of truckers scattered at various tables and a young couple sharing a slice of pie near the window. The waitress, Linda, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, had noticed something odd about the pair as soon as they walked in. Sarah's body language screamed discomfort. She hunched her shoulders, avoided eye contact, and flinched whenever the man reached across the table. Linda had been working at rest stops for 20 years, and she'd seen enough to know when something wasn't right. "Can I get you anything else, sweetheart?" Linda asked, approaching their table for the third time in 30 minutes. She was trying to establish eye contact with Sarah, to offer some form of connection or comfort. "We're fine," Thompson snapped before Sarah could respond. "Just the check." Linda nodded slowly, her concern growing. She'd noticed how Sarah's eyes had widened when she'd approached, how the girl had tried to say something before Thompson cut her off. The waitress also couldn't help but notice that Sarah's backpack looked new, with a price tag partially hidden under the strap, as if it had been hastily purchased. At a nearby table, 2 teenage girls whispered to each other, occasionally glancing at Sarah and Thompson. They had noticed the strange dynamic too, how Thompson kept checking his phone nervously, how he wouldn't let Sarah go to the bathroom alone, insisting on standing right outside the door. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to remember all the safety tips she learned in school. Her teachers had talked about situations like this, about subtle ways to signal for help. Her hands shook as she reached for her water glass, deliberately spilling a few drops on the table. "Sorry," she mumbled, reaching for a napkin. As she wiped up the water, her fingers formed shapes that she'd hoped someone would recognize. The distress signals she learned in her school's safety workshop. Thompson grabbed her wrist. "Stop making a mess," he hissed, his fingers digging into her skin. Sarah winced but remained silent. Through the large windows of the diner, Sarah could see trucks pulling in and out of the rest stop. Cars with families heading home from vacation, truckers starting their night routes, and various travelers stopping for a quick break. Among them was a black SUV that had just pulled in, its driver wearing a military uniform. The bell above the diner's door chimed as the Marine walked in, his presence commanding attention without him trying. Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. She'd always been taught that military personnel, like police officers, were safe people to ask for help. Thompson must have noticed her attention shift because he suddenly became more agitated. "Finish up," he ordered, his voice carrying an edge of urgency. "We need to get back on the road." Sarah's heart pounded as she realized this might be her last chance for help. The rest stop was becoming busier as the evening wore on, and she knew that once they got back in Thompson's car, her opportunities for rescue would become even scarcer. With trembling hands, she reached for another fry, her mind racing to figure out how to signal for help without Thompson noticing. The Marine had settled at the counter, his back straight as he ordered coffee. Sarah silently prayed he would turn around, would notice something wasn't right, would be the one person to see through Thompson's act and save her from whatever horrible fate awaited at their final destination. Staff Sergeant James Rodriguez had been driving for 6 hours straight, making his way back to Camp Lejeune after visiting family in Florida. The rest stop along Interstate 95 seemed like the perfect place to grab some coffee and stretch his legs. As he walked into the diner, the familiar smell of coffee and grilled burgers reminded him of countless stops during his military travels. Rodriguez wasn't planning to stay long, just enough time for a quick coffee and maybe a sandwich. But 15 years in the Marines had taught him to always be alert, to notice details others might miss. His recent training in human trafficking awareness had only sharpened these instincts. Taking a seat at the counter, he ordered his coffee from Linda, the friendly waitress who seemed distracted, her eyes frequently darting to a booth behind him. As he waited for his drink, Rodriguez casually glanced around the diner, a habit formed from years of military service. That's when he first noticed them, the odd pair that didn't quite fit, a young African-American girl, probably around 12, sitting with a white man in his 50s who claimed to be her father. Something about their interaction immediately set off alarm bells in Rodriguez's mind. The girl's body language spoke volumes. Her shoulders were tense, her movements careful and measured, as if trying to avoid drawing attention. The man watching her showed signs of agitation, bouncing his leg under the table, constantly checking his phone, and scanning the diner exits. Rodriguez remembered his recent trafficking awareness training. The instructor had emphasized that traffickers often transport victims across state lines using major highways, and rest stops were common places for them to take breaks. The unusual pairing, the girl's obvious discomfort, and the man's nervous behavior matched many of the warning signs they'd been taught to recognize. Taking small sips of his coffee, Rodriguez maintained his casual demeanor while keeping the pair in his peripheral vision. That's when he noticed something that made his military training kick into high gear. The girl was making subtle hand signals while pretending to wipe the table. These weren't random movements. They were the universal distress signals that had been part of their training, opening and closing her palm, making a fist, extending 4 fingers. His heart rate quickened as he recognized the silent cry for help. Linda approached him with a coffee pot refill, and Rodriguez noticed her concerned expression. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly, making eye contact with the waitress. "Something's not right with those two," Linda whispered, pretending to wipe the counter. "The girl seems terrified, and that man, you won't let her speak to anyone." Rodriguez nodded slightly, his mind already formulating a plan. His training had prepared him for situations like this: remain calm, gather information, and contact authorities without alerting the suspect. He pulled out his phone, appearing to check messages while actually taking photos of the man and the license plate of the vehicle he could see through the window that the man had anxiously checked 3 times in the past 10 minutes. The girl. Rodriguez had overheard the man call her Sarah, made eye contact with him briefly. In that fleeting moment, he saw fear, desperation, and a silent plea for help. His gut instinct, honed by years of military service and combat situations, told him this was a genuine emergency. Using his phone under the counter, Rodriguez sent a text to the police with details about the situation, the license plate number, and his military credentials. He knew local law enforcement would respond quickly to a report from a Marine Staff Sergeant. The man was growing increasingly agitated, checking his watch repeatedly and telling Sarah to hurry up. Rodriguez knew he needed to keep them there until help arrived. He couldn't risk the man leaving with the girl before police could intervene. Standing up slowly, Rodriguez positioned himself near the diner's exit, pretending to look at the bulletin board while effectively blocking the quickest escape route. His military training had taught him the importance of controlling access points in critical situations. Through the window, he spotted a patrol car pulling into the rest stop parking lot, lights off to avoid alerting the suspect. Rodriguez's heart rate remained steady. Years of combat experience had taught him to stay calm in tense situations. He knew the next few minutes would be crucial in ensuring Sarah's safety. The man was now standing, urgently telling Sarah to get up. Rodriguez squared his shoulders, ready to intervene if necessary. The silent rescue operation he'd set in motion was about to reach its critical moment. Inside the busy rest stop diner, the tension was building like a slow-burning fuse. Sarah's heart pounded against her chest as she continued making the subtle distress signals she remembered from her school's safety class. Her trembling fingers formed the gestures under the pretense of arranging her napkin, hoping someone would recognize them. The Marine at the counter, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, maintained his casual demeanor while carefully observing every detail. He noticed how Sarah's eyes kept darting toward the bathroom, then to the exit, then back to her supposed father. Each movement told a story of fear and desperation. Thompson grew increasingly agitated, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. He noticed the Marine's presence, and though Rodriguez appeared focused on his coffee, Thompson sensed something was off. The man's weathered hands clenched and unclenched around his coffee mug, leaving fingerprints on the ceramic surface. Linda, the waitress, created reasons to pass by their table, each time trying to make eye contact with Sarah. She positioned herself where she could watch both the table and Rodriguez, acting as a silent relay between them. When she brought Thompson his check, she deliberately took longer than necessary to process his payment. Sarah remembered more of her safety training. While pretending to adjust her shoe, she made the universal signal for distress, crossing her ankles, then uncrossing them quickly 3 times. She learned the signal could mean unsafe or help needed to those who knew what to look for. Rodriguez caught the signal immediately. His military training kicked in as he noticed other telling details: the girl's new backpack with tags still attached, her unworn shoes that looked recently purchased, and most importantly, the lack of any family resemblance or natural interaction between the pair. Through the diner's large windows, more vehicles were pulling into the rest stop. A second patrol car arrived, parking casually among the other vehicles, its officers inside maintaining radio silence to avoid alerting Thompson. Rodriguez could see them positioning themselves strategically around the building. Thompson's phone buzzed on the table. As he checked it, Sarah used the moment to make eye contact with Rodriguez. In that brief exchange, volumes were spoken without a word. The Marine gave her a subtle nod, just enough to let her know help was coming. Sarah's shoulders relaxed slightly. For the first time in 3 days, she felt a glimmer of hope. Linda approached their table again, this time accidentally dropping her order pad near Sarah's feet. As the girl leaned down to help pick it up, she whispered quickly, "White car, license plate starts with XRJ." Linda nodded imperceptibly, walking back to the counter where she quietly relayed the information to Rodriguez. Thompson's anxiety was visibly increasing. He kept looking at his phone, then the door, then back at Sarah. His fingers drummed an erratic pattern on the table's surface. "Time to go," he said, his voice carrying an edge of panic. "Now." Sarah's hand shook as she reached for her water glass, deliberately knocking it over. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I need to clean this up." She was buying time, and Rodriguez knew it. The Marine shifted his position slightly, maintaining his casual appearance while positioning himself to block any quick exit. He could see the police officers outside moving into position, getting ready to intercept if Thompson tried to make a run for it. Linda brought over extra napkins for the spilled water, her movements deliberately slow. "Take your time, honey," she said kindly, making sure to stay close to the table. Thompson's face reddened with barely contained anger. Through the window, Sarah could see more vehicles arriving. Unmarked police cars positioning themselves strategically around Thompson's white sedan. Her heart raced with a mixture of fear and hope. She knew the next few minutes would determine everything. Rodriguez maintained his position, outwardly relaxed but inwardly ready to spring into action. His years of military training had prepared him for moments like this, when timing and precision could mean the difference between success and disaster. The diner had grown quieter, as if the other patrons sensed the building tension. The only sounds were the soft clink of coffee cups, the hum of the overhead lights, and Thompson's increasingly agitated breathing. The silent communication between Sarah, Rodriguez, Linda, and the approaching officers had created an invisible net, slowly but surely closing in around her captor. These crucial moments of silent communication and strategic positioning were setting the stage for what would happen next. Sarah's fate hung in the balance as everyone involved waited for the perfect moment to act. Time seemed to move in slow motion as Rodriguez calculated his next moves. The diner had become a tactical space, with every position and movement carrying potentially crucial consequences. Through the windows, he could see 3 police cars strategically parked, their officers waiting for his signal. Using his phone, Rodriguez typed a quick message to the officers outside: "Suspect agitated. Girl confirmed trafficking victim. Ready for intercept." He kept his movements casual, appearing to anyone watching as just another customer checking his messages. Thompson's anxiety was reaching a breaking point. He stood up abruptly, grabbing Sarah's arm. "We're leaving. Now." His voice was low, but carried an unmistakable threat. Sarah winced at his grip but remained silent, her eyes wide with fear. Linda, the waitress, moved quickly to block their path, pretending to clean a nearby table. "Oh, let me just get these dishes out of your way," she said, deliberately taking her time. Thompson's face reddened with barely controlled rage. Rodriguez watched as Sarah made one final distress signal, touching her thumb to her palm and closing her fingers over it, the universal sign for danger. It was time to act. He stood up slowly, adjusting his military uniform, and moved toward the restroom area, effectively cutting off Thompson's clearest path to the exit. Outside, the police officers were receiving real-time updates from Rodriguez via text. They positioned themselves near all possible exits, ready to move in at a moment's notice. 2 plainclothes officers had entered the diner, posing as customers and taking seats near the emergency exit. Thompson's eyes darted around the diner, his survival instincts clearly sensing the closing trap. "Move," he growled at Sarah, trying to push past Linda. The waitress fumbled with her tray, accidentally spilling water in their path. Rodriguez pressed a button on his phone, the predetermined signal to the officers outside. He watched as Thompson's face changed from frustration to panic as he noticed the police cars through the window. The man's grip on Sarah's arm tightened. "Sir," Rodriguez said calmly, stepping forward and showing his military ID, "I think you need to let the young lady go." His voice was firm but controlled, the voice of someone used to handling crisis situations. Thompson's free hand moved toward his jacket pocket. Rodriguez noticed the movement and shifted his stance, ready to react. The 2 plainclothes officers stood up, their badges now visible. "Police, don't move," they commanded. Sarah used this moment of confusion to wrench her arm free, ducking behind Linda, who quickly pulled her to safety. Thompson spun around, looking for an escape route, but found himself surrounded. Rodriguez had positioned himself to block any attempt at reaching Sarah. The rest stop's other customers had frozen in place, many recording the scene on their phones. Linda held Sarah protectively, whispering words of comfort as the girl finally let her tears fall freely. "On your knees, hands where we can see them." The police officers moved in with practiced precision. Thompson, realizing he was trapped, made one desperate attempt to run but was quickly tackled by one of the plainclothes officers. Rodriguez maintained his position between Thompson and Sarah, his military training evident in his calm but ready stance. He watched as the officers handcuffed Thompson, reciting his rights as they led him away. Sarah sobbed with relief, still clutching Linda's arm. Rodriguez approached her carefully, kneeling down to her eye level. "You're safe now," he said gently. "You did everything right. Those signals you used, they helped us save you." The local police chief arrived on the scene, quickly taking charge of the situation. He praised Rodriguez's quick thinking and strategic response. "Your military training and awareness made all the difference today," he said, shaking the Marine's hand. Outside, more police cars arrived, along with the victim services unit. Sarah sat wrapped in a blanket, giving her statement to a female officer while Linda continued to stay by her side. Rodriguez watched as the officers searched Thompson's car, discovering evidence that would later prove crucial in court. The sunset painted the sky orange as the drama at the rest stop drew to a close. What had started as a routine coffee stop for a Marine had turned into a life-saving intervention, all because he knew what to look for and how to respond. Rodriguez knew this was just the beginning. There would be statements to give, reports to file, and a legal process to follow. But for now, he focused on the most important thing: a young girl was safe, rescued by a chain of strategic decisions and careful timing. The rest stop diner erupted into controlled chaos as Thompson made his final desperate move. Seeing himself cornered, he suddenly shoved the table toward Rodriguez and grabbed Sarah's arm, attempting to drag her toward the kitchen's back exit. Rodriguez's military training kicked in instantly. He vaulted over the overturned table with practiced ease, his movements fluid and purposeful. The other diners scrambled out of the way as the scene unfolded before them, many pulling out their phones to record the incident. "Let her go." Rodriguez's voice boomed through the diner, carrying the authority of his years in the Marines. Thompson spun around, pulling Sarah in front of him like a shield. The girl's eyes were wide with terror, but she remembered her school safety training. As Thompson's attention focused on Rodriguez, Sarah stomped hard on his foot and twisted away. Linda, who had been waiting for an opportunity, grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her behind the counter. The waitress's maternal instincts took over as she shielded the trembling girl with her body, guiding her toward the kitchen where other staff members waited to help. Thompson, now without his hostage, reached into his jacket. Rodriguez didn't wait to see what he was reaching for. He closed the distance in 3 quick strides, using a controlled takedown maneuver that his Marine training had drilled into muscle memory. Thompson hit the floor with a grunt, his concealed weapon, a small handgun, skittering across the linoleum. The police burst through both entrances, their timing perfect. "Police! Nobody move!" Their commands echoed through the diner as they secured the scene. 2 officers quickly handcuffed Thompson while others established a security perimeter. Sarah watched from behind the counter, tears streaming down her face as the reality of her rescue began to sink in. Linda held her close, whispering reassurances. "You're safe now, honey. You're so brave. It's all over." Rodriguez stood back, his breath steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. He watched as the officers secured Thompson, making sure the man couldn't make any more desperate moves. The gun was carefully retrieved and tagged as evidence by a crime scene technician who had just arrived. Emergency medical services arrived within minutes. Paramedics gently approached Sarah, checking her for injuries while Linda continued to hold her hand. The girl had some bruises on her arms and was dehydrated, but was otherwise physically unharmed. The police chief arrived on scene, quickly taking charge of the situation. "Outstanding work, Staff Sergeant," he said to Rodriguez, shaking his hand. "Your intervention saved this young lady's life. We've been tracking this suspect for weeks." Outside, curious onlookers had gathered, held back by police tape. News vans began arriving, their reporters already piecing together the story of a Marine's heroic intervention at a highway rest stop. Sarah finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can I call my mom?" The simple request brought tears to Linda's eyes. A female police officer quickly offered her phone, staying close as Sarah dialed the number she knew by heart. The sound of Sarah's mother's voice on the other end of the line filled the diner. "Mom? Mommy, it's me. I'm safe. A Marine saved me." Her words dissolved into sobs as her mother's relief and love poured through the phone. Rodriguez watched the scene unfold, maintaining his vigilance even as Thompson was led away to a waiting police car. His military training had taught him that situations weren't over until everyone was completely safe. Victim services arrived, bringing clothes and necessities for Sarah. A child psychologist was already en route to help her process the trauma. The diner staff, led by Linda, had prepared a warm meal for Sarah and the officers, turning their small rest stop into a sanctuary of safety and care. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the rest stop parking lot, Rodriguez finally allowed himself to relax slightly. The intervention had been successful, but he knew this was just the beginning of Sarah's journey to recovery. The Marines' quick thinking and strategic response, combined with the coordinated efforts of law enforcement, had turned what could have been a tragedy into a rescue story that would be remembered for years to come. Sarah looked up from her phone call and caught Rodriguez's eye. Her small nod of gratitude said more than words ever could. The fluorescent lights of the local police station cast harsh shadows as Detective Maria Ramirez spread out the evidence on her desk. 3 days of security camera footage, witness statements, and Thompson's cell phone data painted a disturbing picture that went far beyond one kidnapped girl. Sarah sat in the station's interview room, now wearing fresh clothes provided by victim services. Her parents were racing up from Georgia, but until they arrived, Linda the waitress had refused to leave her side. The girl slowly sipped hot chocolate as she helped investigators piece together her ordeal. "You grabbed me at the Riverside Mall," Sarah explained, her voice stronger now that she felt safe. "I was looking at birthday presents for my friend Emma when he asked me to help find his lost dog." She paused, gripping Linda's hand tighter. "I know I shouldn't have gone with him, but he showed me a picture of a cute puppy on his phone." Detective Ramirez typed rapidly as Sarah spoke. The girl's testimony matched perfectly with the missing person report filed in Georgia 3 days earlier. Security footage from the mall showed Thompson following several young girls before choosing Sarah, revealing his calculated approach. In the adjacent interrogation room, Thompson sat in silence as federal agents revealed what they'd found in his car: multiple phones, fake IDs, and a laptop containing evidence that linked him to a larger trafficking network. His fingerprints matched those found in 3 other kidnapping cases across state lines. "Mr. Thompson, the FBI agent said, sliding photographs across the table. Or should I say, Kenneth Morris? We've been looking for you for quite some time. The man's real identity had been discovered through fingerprint analysis, revealing a history of similar crimes dating back 5 years. Sarah's parents arrived in a rush of tears and relief, having driven nonstop from Georgia. The reunion in the station's family room was emotional, with Sarah's mother holding her daughter so tight it seemed she'd never let go. Her father shook hands with Rodriguez, Linda, and the officers, struggling to find words to express his gratitude. "Your daughter's incredibly brave," Rodriguez told them, his uniform still crisp despite the long day. Her quick thinking and those distress signals she remembered from school made all the difference. The investigation expanded rapidly. Morris's phone records led to the discovery of a trafficking ring operating along the I-95 corridor. Maps found in his car showed marked locations of other rest stops and meeting points. Detective Ramirez coordinated with FBI agents as they began connecting the dots to other missing persons cases. Linda finally prepared to leave, having stayed well past her shift to support Sarah. "You're going to be okay, sweetheart," she said, hugging the girl goodbye. Sarah held on tight, whispering thank you to the waitress who had become her protector. The police chief called a brief press conference outside the station. Without revealing Sarah's identity, he praised the coordinated effort that led to her rescue. "This case demonstrates the importance of public awareness and training in recognizing human trafficking," he stated. "Thanks to a Marine's quick thinking and a young girl's courage, we've uncovered a criminal network that has been operating across multiple states." Inside the station, Sarah's mother watched the news coverage while holding her daughter close. "I never stopped looking for you," she whispered. "Not for 1 second." Sarah's father stood nearby, his hand resting protectively on his daughter's shoulder as they listened to the chief describe how their family's nightmare had led to a breakthrough in several ongoing investigations. Morris's true identity opened a floodgate of evidence. Cold cases from 3 states suddenly had new leads. Detective Ramirez's board filled with connections, other rest stops, other attempts, other victims who might now be found thanks to the evidence discovered in his car. As evening fell, Sarah and her parents prepared to head home to Georgia. Rodriguez, who had stayed to give his statement, watched them leave. The girl who had been so terrified just hours ago was now safely sandwiched between her parents, heading home where she belonged. Detective Ramirez looked at her evidence board one last time before heading home. Thanks to one observant Marine, a brave young girl, and a caring waitress, a dangerous criminal had been caught. But more importantly, a child was safe, and a family was whole again. The Johnson family's home in suburban Georgia was filled with a mix of tears, hugs, and relief as relatives and close friends gathered to welcome Sarah back. Yellow ribbons still adorned the trees outside their house, and "Welcome Home Sarah" signs decorated the front yard. Sarah's best friend Emma was the first to arrive, running through the door and wrapping her arms around Sarah in a tight embrace. The two girls held each other, crying and laughing simultaneously. "I knew you'd come back," Emma whispered. "I just knew it." In the kitchen, Sarah's mother Karen couldn't stop cooking, a nervous energy driving her to prepare all of Sarah's favorite foods. The counter was filled with mac and cheese, chocolate chip cookies, and the special banana bread that had always been Sarah's comfort food. Her father Michael stood nearby, watching his daughter through the doorway, still hardly believing she was really home. The doorbell rang continuously as more people arrived. Sarah's teachers from school, neighbors who had helped search for her, and members of their church community all came bearing gifts, food, and most importantly, support. The living room slowly filled with people who had spent the last terrifying days helping the Johnsons search for their daughter. Linda, the waitress from the rest stop, had driven down from Virginia to be there. She entered the house carrying a handmade quilt, tears forming in her eyes as she saw Sarah surrounded by love and safety. Sarah ran to hug her, the bond formed during those tense moments in the diner still strong. "I want you to have this," Linda said, presenting the quilt. "I made it yesterday, to remind you that there are good people in the world who will always help keep you safe." Sarah wrapped herself in the soft fabric, breathing in its fresh, clean scent, so different from the fear and uncertainty of the past few days. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez arrived in his dress uniform, having taken leave to attend the reunion. He brought with him a special gift, a Marine Corps challenge coin, traditionally given to recognize special achievements. "You showed incredible courage," he told Sarah, pressing the coin into her palm. "You're a warrior." The local police chief who had coordinated the search attended briefly, bringing news that helped everyone breathe easier. Morris's trafficking network was being dismantled, with arrests happening across 3 states. Sarah's rescue had created a domino effect, leading to the freedom of other victims and the prevention of future abductions. A child psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery sat quietly with Sarah when the crowd of well-wishers became overwhelming. Together they worked on breathing exercises, helping Sarah process the waves of emotion that swept over her. "It's okay to feel everything you're feeling," the therapist assured her. "You're safe now, and these feelings are part of healing." Sarah's younger brother Tommy hadn't left her side since she returned. He sat next to her on the couch, his hand occasionally touching her arm as if making sure she was really there. The 10-year-old had spent the days of her absence making missing person posters and refusing to sleep in his own bed, convinced his big sister would return. As evening approached, Karen brought out a cake decorated with fresh strawberries, Sarah's favorite. The gathering formed a circle around her as she blew out the candles. "Make a wish," someone called out. Sarah smiled, knowing her biggest wish had already come true. She was home. The local news station sent a reporter to cover the reunion, but the Johnsons kept them outside, protecting Sarah's privacy. Through the window, Sarah could see the reporter interviewing Rodriguez about the importance of teaching children safety awareness and recognizing trafficking signs. As the sun set and guests began to leave, each offering hugs and words of support, Sarah felt exhaustion settling in. The past few days seemed like a nightmare that was finally fading. Her mother noticed her tiredness and began gently ushering the remaining visitors toward the door. That night, Sarah slept in her own bed for the first time in what felt like forever. Her room was exactly as she'd left it, her stuffed animals arranged on her pillows, her favorite books on the nightstand, the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to her ceiling. Her parents took turns checking on her throughout the night, watching their daughter sleep peacefully, finally home where she belonged. The reunion had been more than just a celebration of Sarah's return. It was a community's affirmation that love, vigilance, and courage could overcome evil. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there are always people willing to help, to fight, to bring the lost ones home. 6 months after her rescue, Sarah Johnson stood confidently before an auditorium filled with middle school students. Her voice, once silenced by fear, now carried strength as she shared her story to help others stay safe. "Trust your instincts," she told the attentive audience. "Remember the safety signals we learned today. They saved my life." Behind her, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez nodded in approval. They had been traveling to schools across the state, teaching students about personal safety and trafficking awareness. The changes in Sarah were remarkable. Regular sessions with her trauma counselor had helped her process the experience. Though nightmares still occasionally disturbed her sleep, she had channeled her healing into helping others. Her parents watched from the back of the auditorium, pride evident in their faces. Linda's Diner at the rest stop had become a training center for truck stop employees along the I-95 corridor. The waitress had worked with law enforcement to develop a program teaching staff how to recognize signs of trafficking. A photo of Sarah's rescue hung on the diner wall, serving as a reminder of the difference awareness could make. The investigation sparked by Sarah's rescue had led to significant breaks in trafficking cases across the eastern seaboard. Morris's network had been completely dismantled, with 17 arrests and the rescue of 12 other potential victims. Detective Ramirez had received a commendation for her work on the case. Sarah's school had implemented new safety programs, with Sarah herself helping design the curriculum. Students learned about modern trafficking tactics, safety signals, and the importance of trusting their instincts. The program was being adopted by other schools in the district. Rodriguez had received a promotion and now included trafficking awareness in his military training sessions. He used Sarah's case as an example of how civilian-military cooperation could save lives. The Marine Corps had recognized his actions with a commendation medal. The Johnson family had grown stronger through the ordeal. Family dinner became a sacred time, with phones turned off and conversations flowing freely. Sarah and her brother Tommy had grown closer, their bond strengthened by the experience of almost losing each other. Emma, Sarah's best friend, had started a student safety club at their school. The club organized workshops and created informational posters about personal safety. Sarah served as the club's advisor, sharing her experience to help others stay alert and aware. One evening, Sarah received a letter that brought tears to her eyes. It was from another trafficking survivor who had been rescued thanks to the increased awareness following Sarah's case. "Your courage gave me courage," the letter read. "You helped save me without even knowing it." The rest stop where everything had been transformed. New security cameras were installed, staff received regular training, and a small plaque commemorated Sarah's rescue. Linda had been promoted to manager, and she ensured every employee knew the warning signs she had noticed that crucial day. Sarah's story had reached beyond her local community. A national organization fighting human trafficking had invited her to speak at their annual conference. Her parents would accompany her, supporting their daughter's mission to turn her trauma into triumph. The psychological scars were healing slowly but surely. Sarah had learned to find strength in her vulnerability, sharing her story to prevent others from facing similar dangers. Her counselor had helped her understand that her experience, while traumatic, didn't define her future. 1 year after her rescue, Sarah organized a thank you celebration for everyone who had helped save her. Rodriguez, Linda, Detective Ramirez, and the rest stop staff gathered in the Johnsons' backyard. It was a day of gratitude, healing, and hope. As Sarah prepared for high school, she knew her experience would always be part of her story. But now it was a story of survival, of community, of the power of awareness and quick thinking. She had transformed from victim to advocate, helping others find their voice and strength. The final chapter of Sarah's ordeal had become a beginning rather than an end. Her courage had sparked changes in law enforcement training, school safety programs, and community awareness. Most importantly, it had shown others that with vigilance, cooperation, and courage, lives could be saved and futures restored. Sarah's last diary entry from that year read, "Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the bridge to helping others. I'm not just a survivor now, I'm a protector, making sure other kids know how to stay safe. That's how I turned my nightmare into hope."